All right, so I'm going to guess this is about it. Dustin will be helping. The fun part about this is it's really last minute, but it's building on a lot of experience. So this last year, I was working on the Horse Thief Cave project, trying to figure out how to get digital sketching to work for Horse Thief Cave sketching. And so a lot of this presentation will be focused on how we can do this for Horse Thief Cave. But I learned how to do it, and Dustin learned how to do it at the Cheve expedition, where they do their entire multi-month-long project entirely on digital sketch. There is no paper involved, and they actually literally have devices moving in and out of the cave to keep data safe on the surface while continuing to do work in the cave. So it's a robust process. And a couple background items. So the cool thing about it is when you have the modern Disto, Disto X, Disto X2, and I think the Cavetron, is that the other one? The Brick 4, that's right. So any of those that are connecting directly to TopoDroid are kind of the current modern standard for a great way to do digital sketch. So couple things with digital sketch that are amazing and make me never want to do paper sketch again. I never have to start a new page. My next shot never goes off the page. The page is infinitely scalable. And that, for me, sold me on digital sketch forever. I hate having to redo work every time I change the page. So what you get with this is TopoDroid allows you all of the capabilities you have in your paper sketchbook, and then some. Because the nature of these Disto devices, they upload their Bluetooth or their data via Bluetooth, you're able to essentially do what I learned in Cheve they call poor man's LiDAR. So you essentially, at a high level, what you're doing as an instruments person is you are shooting a sphere of points around each survey station, and then you complete that by doing your triple shot check to the next station. And then once that station has been backsite double checked to make sure that it's the right angle, elevation, etc., then the sketcher will just download all the Bluetooth data directly off the device. There's no transcription errors. And the really, 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 really cool thing for a sketcher is that LiDAR, that poor man's LiDAR, defines your left wall, your right wall, your ceiling, and your floor. So one of the hard things as a sketcher is kind of doing your line plot accurately to the right length, and then sketching the walls, ceiling, and floor around your plan and profile. That takes the majority of your time as a sketcher because that's what you have to do the most accurately. What happens when you go to digital sketch? All of that is done for you, right? So as a sketcher, all I need to do when running book, or running tablet now, I guess is what it should be called, is I just essentially download the data, I watch it all come in, and then I draw floor detail. And I'm often done before the next shot's ready to go. So anybody who's been on a normal paper sketch process, you know you're always waiting for the person running book to catch up. It was quite often at Cheve where I was me and one instrument person, and I was waiting on the instrument person. It's kind of crazy, right? So where we are, that's super valuable due to temperature, due to water, things like that. You can go so much faster and you are less likely to get hypothermic. So I am a huge proponent of this. Not to say I'm at that level right now. I'm probably still a little bit slow in catching up, but certainly it's a great opportunity to make a survey team run much faster and more accurately. And it does that by taking half of the load off of the sketcher just by doing all of that via the device electronics of downloading the data and then pre-plotting not just your line plot, already corrected for your 3D to 2D projection on high angle shots, but also then putting in your wall, ceiling, and floor. So all you do is connect the dots, wall, ceiling, and floor, and then draw in your floor detail, and you're ready to go to the next station. So it's a pretty slick process. I want to talk through a bunch of different things that are involved in that. So I'm going to be looking over here. I have another tablet which has my notes on it, so I don't forget anything. And then the idea is I will be using and projecting the tablet so you see what I do as I'm doing it. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate. I intend this to be a much more interactive. There are 0 slides. This is all demo interactive, and I'll talk through whatever it is you guys are interested in learning regarding Digital Sketch. And anything I don't know, hopefully Dustin knows, because he's done it probably more recently than I have, having just come back from Cheve last week. So he was doing this last week. I haven't done it since Horse Thief last fall. So I might be a little bit rusty, and I might lean on Dustin a little bit in those cases. So first of all, yes, Carl. Okay, so that's a very important question. Carl asked, what tablet am I using? I am using a Samsung tablet, very specifically and intentionally. And the reason I'm using a Samsung tablet is, let's see if I can do this with the microphone, but it has the S Pen. The S Pen is really key because you can see up on the screen there's a little dot. I'm not touching the screen. The S Pen is preferred as so the Samsung tablet is preferred because the S Pen is the most accurately recorded screen device. So it makes your life a lot easier. This happens to be I think it's called Active or something like that, Samsung Active 3. And I put it in a kind of a bulletproof case that has this nice thing that doesn't let me drop it. And then I also have the string connecting the pen so I don't drop that. And then I can just wander through the cave with just this, right? So highly recommended, the Samsung.
If you want a mic stand, we do have that.
Perfect. Mic stand might be very handy. Thank you, David. All right. So yeah, I have this Samsung tablet. There's a couple things just to keep in mind when you're doing this. How many people are sketchers? How many people have sketched cave before? Not most of the audience, okay. So sketching is an interesting animal. How many people have been on a survey crew before? Cave survey? Everybody, almost everybody, perfect. So you'll recognize that there's generally 3 positions, 3 roles on a survey team. You have your lead tape or your lead person who's setting the stations. You have your front sight person who's next to the sketcher, and then you have your sketcher, right? So 3 defined roles, and they're all essential and important to a survey crew. You can make it all the way down to a 1-person survey team, which I've done before as a digital sketcher, and I would never try it if I wasn't doing digital sketch. But yeah, so the 3 roles on a survey team. First person figures out where to set the station. That's the lead tape person. And so there's a lot. Let me back up for a second. The easiest job on the crew is front sight, right? All you have to do is read the instrument. You point and shoot. You read the instrument. You have to figure out what's going on. What you're doing is you're doing that position is you're learning, first of all, how to get the numbers, how to get the shots correct, how to make sure you're not being jittery, you're not doing something funny. But you're also paying attention to what the lead tape person is doing. Historic name, I'm not sure what it's called now. Point person, yes. So the point person is doing 2 things. They're figuring out where to put the next station, and then they're doing a backsight to make sure that the station read was accurate, right? But figuring out where to put a station is a tricky thing, and also they have to figure out which direction the passage is trending and which way you're going to take, right? So they're at the whim of the sketcher, but largely what they're looking for is, am I going down the main passage or is this a lead? And they have to figure out all of that and pick the right stations for the next survey point. And then the most skill requiring job on the team is the sketcher. If you're doing normal pencil and paper, that person has to be ready to look up information on trigonometry tables as they're converting from 3D to 2D. They have to record the data without error, and they have to draw everything at the appropriate detail and at the appropriate scale. So by the nature of the survey team, it is the sketcher who is in charge of the team. They're setting the direction and the pace. The point person is figuring out where the next station point is, and then the main front sight person is taking, in this world that we'll be talking about, they're the ones who are recording all the data. So 3 roles, very essential. I'm going to be focusing primarily or exclusively on the sketcher role. I will talk a little bit about the other 2 roles briefly, but mostly what I'm focused on is getting people how to do digital sketch, because it's really cool and it takes a lot of the mental load off of being a sketcher. And I'm usually not as grumpy at the end of the day when doing digital sketch, because I'm not frustrated with how it's working and looking, and I'm not cramped and hunched over the tablet all day. So I'm up and moving around, I'm looking a lot more, and I'm generally happier. So if you are somebody who has sketched before on paper, I strongly recommend you try this digital sketch stuff, because it's awesome. So talk through a couple things here. What does this say? Okay, whatever that is. All right, so one thing that you have when you are in the sketchbook is you have other pages where you can put things, such as a reference page for what symbols to use. You don't have that in this method, but you certainly have a digital tablet where you can put any data you want. So I've done a couple things here, like I've preloaded a cave sketch symbol sheet, which I highly recommend you do. I don't want to sign in. Let's just go. Oh, come on. All right, epic fail here. There we go. So it shows me, all right, if I need to draw halictites, that's what they look like, right? Can you guys see the tiny little dot? Let me see. Oh, it's not casting. Let me see if I can turn on this thing that David told me about. It's a pretty cool setting. It's in the developer area, he said. Where's the developer mode, David? Advanced features?
You probably have to go, like you have to turn on developer mode by going to, I have no idea if Samsungs are even the same. I think it's usually under advanced, and it's a selection under advanced. Is it, usually it's like the Android version number or software information.
Ooh, that did something.
Nope, that was an Easter egg, not the, nope. Okay, this is probably not the right time to try and figure this out. Oh, here we go. There, okay. So I had to tap on the build number
Okay.
enough times till we have developer mode. And then if we go all the way down to input show taps.
Perfect. All right, thanks, David. Yep. So now you should be able to. Perfect. Yeah. So now you can see my tiny little cursor. So basically, if I open up this thing, I can figure out what a column looks like and all of that stuff. Because one of the challenges with how Digital Sketch works is there are multiple programs that people use for Digital Sketch, or let me change that. There are multiple programs that are available to use for Digital Sketch. Only one of them is recommended to use, and it's not the most user-friendly or highly functional, it's just the most robust. So it's the least likely to lose data, and therefore is the one that people prefer to use. So one of the problems with that is there are things like this ledge here, and ceiling ledge and all of that. These are nice line details. There are some things like soda straws and halictites that are part of the Digital Sketch tool, but it's strongly recommended not to use them because they don't translate into all of the cartography systems. So it's strongly preferred to manually draw everything just as you were doing on the paper sketchbook instead of using the default sketch cheaters, whatever, the icons and other things in the sketch tool. So because of that, it's very helpful to preload a symbol sheet so that you can switch to it and look something up if you don't happen to remember what you have there. And then for Horse Thief Cave, we have some jot form and some other stuff that's really good to have so that you can do that. I'm going to focus entirely here in this presentation on TopoDroid. So TopoDroid is one of the several different digital sketch tools that exists, but it's the preferred one because it's the one that's least likely to lose data and generally is most robust. It's also what most people have available if they're doing the Disto X's, and I'm guessing the bricks do it this way too, but the bricks do internal calibration. Disto X's calibration is handled through TopoDroid most commonly, right? So with TopoDroid, there's a couple things to start with that are important, and it gets to the settings. So one of the things we need to work out for the Horse Thief Cave process is seeing if there's a way that we can download and upload settings so that everybody's tablet's set the same and does things very consistently. But there's a handful of things that I think are important. Let me look at my cheater notes and make sure I cover the correct ones. So let's see. Following settings are ones I found useful. Line settings. So most of these don't matter that much. Work directory, text size is something that's just a personal preference, button size, etc. Where we get interesting is in survey data, I think it is. It's hard to see here. Station names, units, shot data. Let me figure out where it is. Because there's a handful of line settings I wanted to talk about, but again, it's been a while since I've looked at this to figure out where line settings are.
For like the sketch itself?
Yeah.
I think you might have to start a sketch.
Okay. Could be that I have to start a sketch. Yeah, right. But units, obviously feet, decimal degrees. Sketch units, this is an important one, is 2 feet for grid cell size. Obviously for Cheve and a few other projects, you might have people that want to use metric units, so you can go in and you can change that pretty easily here on the settings. Shot data gives you different tolerances and maximum lengths. Generally a good idea, rule of thumb, to have a maximum shot length of about 50 feet. There are times where longer is acceptable, but most projects do have a project-wide limit. Horse Thief Cave has a 50-foot limit. And so you just look through a number of these and see what's there. Yep, nothing there that's relevant. Location, yep, we don't care about that. And accuracy, we don't care about that. That's also part of the configuration. So basically, whoops, where was I on that? I was one level too deep. Let me jump back in there, double check, make sure I didn't miss anything. Survey data, sketching, tool picker. This is what tools are on screen at the time, very handy to have. Triple bottom bar, I've enabled that because it gives you more things on the screen that you have to mess with for different settings on the fly, which is very handy. Points, not that important. Lines, there it is. Line width, it's important here if you have this to adjust it down so that it's smaller segment sizes and smaller scale sizes so you have a little bit cleaner area to work from. So we have recorded all of these for the Horse Thief project, and you can certainly work from that set. I don't really want to go through in great detail about all of these unless Carl wants me to. Where is the scale for the map? 20, okay, so yeah, the scale for that is in here somewhere. I forget where it is. Line width, station name. Nope, it is. Nope, one more out, I guess. Shot data. I think it's here. I just was not seeing it initially. Yes, exactly. So One of the things that you have to be very attentive to when you're doing paper is 20 feet to the inch. Here, everything scales. So you can zoom in, you can draw out greater detail, you can zoom out, you can draw out lower quality detail. And so one of the settings that I pointed to earlier was the 2 feet. That's your grid size. So when you're doing a grid overlay, you can get some sense of scale, which is important as a sketcher to figure out kind of where things are. But for the most part, it's going to, you can expand and contract on the fly. So it's less salient as you're working on that sort of stuff.
I would say the station's policy is really important too. Maybe the most important setting because that's the order that you shoot the disto in. Because the tablet
Right.
identifies displays versus survey station. And so you can change whether you do displays from the station first and then shoot to the next station, or you can change it, shoot to the next station, and then do displays at the station you're at. There's a bunch of different ways to configure it, but just knowing what you are, how you are configuring it first, the station's policy. So consistency. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not just consistency. It's also the expectation that people have when they come to do a survey day. The expectation is I shoot all displays first, then I shoot the next line, right? So yes, it's consistency, but it's also independent expectations that that's how people work. And if you ended up flipping those around, that would confuse people. So
Confuse the people, or would it confuse the computer too? So if you did left instead of, if you moved
right, so
straight and you shot left first, the computer would think left was the straight shot.
well, that's so one of the things you need to do with the disto, I'm not sure how it works on the brick, but you have on the disto the ability to set a triple shot check. And that one, from the disto's perspective, it just says you did 3 shots to the exact same area. They all agree it's the same point. That's what's interpreted by the sketch software as your line plot, right? So a single shot won't do it. A single shot is a splay. It's only that triple shot check, which tells you this is the next station.
It'll assign the sleigh to a different station though.
Right.
So if I shoot A1 to A2 and I mess it up somehow, like I shoot displays first and then shoot the shot, but that's not what the setting is. It might assign those A1 displays to A2, and that'll confuse the sketcher.
Yes. And then the sketcher will be grumpy as they have to delete and change data on the fly, right? So, and that's still one of the things that happens quite a lot here is there are scenarios where as the sketcher you have to jump into a little bit of a data edit mode, and I'll talk a little bit about that in certain situations. All right, so unless there's anything on settings, just know that there's more settings in here than you'll ever have to touch, but there are a few of them that need to be consistently set so that people are interacting with the tools in the way that are consistent, as you're saying, with between sketch team or between survey teams. So I'm going to jump out of that. So one of the things when you start this up, TopoDroid has a horrible user interface. I mean, I'll just say that right out. It's confusing and annoying and all of that. There are tools out there that have better user interfaces. They just don't work as well. So you got the choice of a good user interface or a functional tool. So TopoDroid is the functional tool at this point. Hopefully in the future there will be additional tools that are both user interface well designed as well as functionally well designed. So, but basically the rule of thumb is, as you see across the top here when you start up TopoDroid. Well, here let me just get out of TopoDroid completely and kill off. Here, just close all. So when I start up TopoDroid, it brings me here. I have some stuff at the bottom. I have a few icons across the top. The one on the left, usually on the icons across the top, you go left to right, you click through them, and they do the things you expect them to do and need them to do. The first one that has a picture of the disto, you do that to connect to the disto that your front sight person is using. While Android can connect to multiple Bluetooth devices, and TopoDroid is theoretically set up to be able to read from multiple disto devices, I've never been able to get it to work. So the hope was that I would be able to have a front sight and a back sight that are both connected to this application. I can't get that to work. If anybody can, I'd love to see it, but at this point, what that means is for digital sketch using TopoDroid, you'll be doing front sites only are the ones that download. There are some ways that I'm investigating trying to get back sites in there. For places like Cheve, what they do is they just validate that the back site is accurate from matching the front site, but it's not then recorded anywhere. We're trying to record that for Horse Thief Cave just to show good data practices. And I think there are some ways, but still under investigation. So anyway, the first thing you do is you connect to the disto, and then the next one, the plus, is basically create a new survey. So I did this just now. I did this AGM demo and downloaded all the data that was on my disto, which is a kind of a cool process once you start doing it. But it's a very simple thing. The create new survey is essentially the front page of any paper survey book, right? So you're gonna have the name of the survey, what team was on it, what your start station was, magnetic declination, which is generally always ignored. You fill that in afterwards, and then a description if you want, right? So I just did that with this AGM demo. I also have the Horse Thief entrance and a couple of other Horse Thief cave things I'll jump back and forth to kind of show you what's up. So again, what we're trying to do with Horse Thief is this one right here. These two bottom ones are kind of an ideal way of what we're trying to do for a naming structure. One of the big problems with anything you're doing from a Project Cave surveys perspective is file management, right? You need to make sure that you understand what each trip is doing, what that sketch is covering, and all of the other things there. So in this case, we have HTC, which is Horse Thief Cave, so you understand what the cave is, and then an underscore, kind of a description, and then what we're doing with Horse Thief Cave is we're doing trip numbers. So this was trip 39, right? So that's a kind of a standard naming scheme we're going to try to keep with is the cave name, where you are in the cave, and what your trip number is. That way we can reference it after the fact. And this is going to get important. Dustin and I were talking a little bit about leads versus main passage and how to handle that from a digital sketch standpoint. And that's also still in flux, but the problem is essentially registering your side leads against the main passage can be problematic. And it's also possible that you can just download the original main passage sketch and add on to that, right? So we have a couple of paths here, and if you have the file named correctly, then that's a really good way to start from the existing sketch and add new content to it, and then you can update it with a new name that reflects your current trip. So let me just pull up a couple of these so you can see what they look like. So this is the long list of data. We have the station name L43, L44. You can see here this is a shot from 43 to 44. It has your distance, azimuth, and elevation. And it also has this very interesting arrow indicator. I'll talk about that later, but know that that's a very important thing for you to pay attention to as a sketcher, is what direction that arrow is pointing. It could be pointing to the right, it can be pointing to the left, or it can be vertical. And those mean different things based on what it's trying to do for your profile. And then all of the splay shots are just these empty pieces here without anything in the parentheses, right? So this trip we had 45 stations, and so we can go to the sketch now. And I want to just look at the plan. And one of the things you can see here is, like, this would have been crazy with trying to have some of these larger rooms. Again, getting back to Carl's questions, each square on the grid is 2 feet, so there's your scale. But you don't really have to set that for your data reading in, because the data is correctly scaled between the disto and the tablet. So anyway, what happens here is you can see the light blue lines. I'll just talk about it at a high level, and then we'll get into doing it a little bit. So the blue lines are these poor man's LiDAR. And what's really cool is, you know, as I said, you get to just already know where the walls, ceiling, and floor are. When 34 goes to 35, we have all of these blue splays that go out from 34, and you can just connect the dots and draw in your lines. Now, as a sketcher, you still need to exercise some professional discretion. You can see there are some things here where it's the blue line is outside of my sketch because I determined that the walls weren't actually there, right? Sometimes it can get into cracks or other weird things that you wouldn't want to represent on your sketch as a sketcher, but for the most part, you can draw in the walls by connecting the dots of where those blue lines end, right? So it speeds things up dramatically, and then from there, you can begin putting in your floor detail. Now, one of the things that you always want to do as a sketcher is make sure that you have pretty much all of your floor covered with floor detail, right? It's just the best practice. And one of the cool things you can do is, on Carl's point, is I can come in here and I can make a very tiny, oops, I'm in the wrong mode here, I need to be drawing, but I can come in and just do this tiniest dot, and then when you zoom out, it's like almost invisible. So if there's anywhere that you need to put in, like this little grotto area is super cool, I want to draw in a couple of tiny halictites or something because it's super interesting, you can do that at a high level of detail, and then you can zoom out and get everything else at a lower detail. If you're drawing large scale boulders in breakdown, you don't need to do that at high resolution, you can do that at zoomed out. So you have the flexibility to zoom in and out. There's a couple things that are relevant here. Notice that the walls are red, and there's a couple of, so this down here, I mentioned I had the triple layer or triple tool chooser. So this first tool chooser is essentially symbols that we don't use, and I'll emphasize that again. We don't use them because, people remember why? They don't interface with all the programs cartographers can use. In particular, some of the most common ones, Adobe ones, don't grab these symbols appropriately. But some of the open source ones, they do. So if you ever want to use a larger symbol set, talk to your cartographer and see if they'll allow it. If you don't know who the cartographer is, just don't. Just draw them by hand, right? That being said, you can see here there's a couple things. The red line is relevant. Red line for TopoDroid means walls. So if you're drawing a wall, you go to red line. If you're drawing a not wall, you go to this kind of white or gray line. And those are the two line colors you use, and you switch back and forth as appropriate. The other thing that I've done is this guy right here, this 3-dot symbol. That's essentially sand. And the problem is Digital Sketch doesn't pick up when I tap, 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 tap. You have to tap and drag a little bit. And that's really annoying to do when you have a whole area that's sand. So that's the one symbol I ever use is sand, because it's just a whole bunch of dots. And I'm hopeful that that transfers sufficiently into whatever applications there are that cartographers use. But if it doesn't, it's going to transfer in as something. And if it's the only thing you're doing that's not hand-drawn, it should be obvious enough to the cartographer how they'll label it. So basically, yeah, you just do that. You have the ability to write whatever you want, just hand draw it. It's just like any other paper drawing, you just happen to be drawing electronically. Now, one thing you'll see here for anybody who's up on sketching, I kind of forgot to do cross sections. This was my first digital sketch attempt in a long time. I forgot the cross sections. One of the things I need to call out is there are ways of doing cross sections in TopoDroid. There are at least two, and they both suck. Do them by hand. Hand draw your cross sections, right? The downside of that is you don't have the data to just copy. You actually have to do the hard work of knowing all your dimensions. So yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. Then, let's see, where is it? So a couple of icons up here. This one right here is, whoops, not the one I was wanting. This one right here is your switcher between plan and profile. So here you just tap that and you go to the profile view, and again it's all automatic. You already know where your walls, ceiling, floor are, but again, you have to use discretion as the sketcher, because even though, you know, dots are saying they go there or not quite there, you can still override it. It just speeds up your process. So you have kind of a feeling there, and you can just switch very quickly back to plan view. You can draw whatever you want, and you pop over to profile, draw whatever you want, keep going back and forth. Okay, so that's your general process as you're doing this. Everything is hand-drawn. Don't forget to do your cross-sections, hand-drawn, and then you're just basically connecting the dots for the blue lines and then coloring in all of your floor detail. Now we can get into a little bit more details, but I want to pause if there's any questions.
Do you have dual cards in that, or single memory, or what?
I have not added anything to this. This is just a stock tablet with a fancy case on it.
Is there, I guess, duplicate backup?
So one of the things they do in Cheve is they use SIM cards SIM card's the wrong word. They use data cards that plug into the tablets at some location. I forget where it is now. And then you just store it on your SD card. You can store that data on the SD card, and then you can transfer that to take it outside of the cave if you want.
It's still carried out of the cave before it's uploaded.
You can, if you have two devices, what we were doing,
They'll talk to each other.
Yep.
yeah, you can export it from TopoDroid to the device and then Bluetooth transfer it to a new device.
Okay.
So that you have it on two devices before you leave.
Because I think you,
Yes.
I mean, you're going through all this trouble. I think you want to have an in-cave backup.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can always just as long as the other device has TopoDroid and the capability to wirelessly do that.
Yep, exactly. So again, that's how they do it in Cheve, and I'll use Cheve as kind of the gold standard, because again, they will take one of these devices underground for a month at a time, and they'll have it backed up underground, and they also have a copy that can come out above ground, so that you can actually plot it at base camp without actually having the original sketcher ever come out. It's also a little bit more robust because, again, those SD cards, if you dunk them underwater and you take them back up, they still work just fine. If you take paper and do all that, it's going to be a little bit more problematic. So in some ways, they're actually more robust than the paper versions, but yeah, it's still an electronic device with its own quirks. Okay, let me just back up again here. One thing I strongly suggest, if you start doing this, get TopoDroid and play with it for a while, because it is quirky and things are not where you expect them to be. So I just got back to the beginning here. I'm already connected to, or at least I was earlier when I started this, connected to my disto, and I just did this AGM demo and mistype demo. And then what you do is you just hit this download button right here, and that just pulls all the data off of your disto. Turns out I apparently had some data on there from, I don't know what I was doing, but 17 stations worth of data, right? And so once you hit this download button, it pulls all of the memory off of your disto, which means if you're just starting a new survey trip, you want your disto memory to read 0. You don't want anything on there, right? Because that's going to pollute the very first time that you download that. So you need to make sure you start with a memory cleared disto, which is what I didn't do, and I was just downloading it here as a cheap way of clearing it, but discovered I had a whole bunch of data on there. So anyway, to download it, you press this button that has the arrow pointing down, which means download, and I got all of these stations. And then to jump over to this sketch, I have a plan and a profile. Jump over to plan, and lo and behold, not a lot of interesting data on here, but I do have some. So again, the goal is poor man's LiDAR, which means 50 to 100 shots at each station in a sphere around the station. So that means not just forward, but also back, up, down, every direction you can. If there is anything interesting that you think is a standout, like there might be a passage over this way, let me shoot around the passage. I want to get a full ceiling height. I want to try to shoot long distance down there. I want to get where each of the walls are. What you're trying to do is really represent where all of the salient cave features are. So, as I said before, the front sight person is the least skilled on the team, technically. Any person can fill that front sight role. With Poor Man's LiDAR, there is a little bit more responsibility on the front sight person to make sure they're actually shooting all the things they should, right? So they're not just shooting 50 shots right straight ahead. We need 50 shots in a sphere around the station.
So point setter's doing that, and the guy that's doing left, right, up, down is back with the book.
So no, the left, right, up, down guy is no longer necessary, but that's the guy that's doing all these shots, right? The point setter is literally just setting points and validating a back sight.
Who's doing the sphere?
The front sight person is doing the sphere,
Front sight, not point.
not point, right? So point's job is find the next station, and then and then allow the station to be highlighted for the front sight person to do all of their stuff to it, and then they double check that shot, and then they go set the next station. So it's interesting because compared to historically, the lead or the point person has slightly less work than they used to, and the front sight person has more work, and the sketcher has dramatically less work. So kind of interesting changes as we're seeing this job evolve. Let's see here. I don't think this is really going to be what I want, but let me just show you let's assume that this cave is already sketched, and here let me get into draw mode, red line, and just say, all right, we went and did something like this, and it was a narrow passage, and then it got a little bit wider. Oops. Can erase this little bit right here because I messed up. Come back and draw, and it's like it actually went like this. Now there are settings for how close that can be before it auto connects, and so that's just something to pay attention to. If you don't want to deal with it, I can come in here and just say, you know what, let's just do, whoops, it's already in the draw mode. I can just do that, and I can come in here and, oops, try it over. But you notice what I did there is I zoomed in so that I could have better access to do that level of small granular control, but then I zoom back out again. And then if I want to switch to profile view from 17, let's see, apparently I have a very low ceiling here. And then, but it's a pretty deep floor. Oops, I don't want to do that. I want to continue here and do something like that. Now, as I mentioned, there was the arrow that indicated in the data, either left or right or vertical. And here's where you see the impacts of that, right? So what we normally do when you're sketching is you do a running profile, which generally means you start at the left of the page and you do everything moving to the right of the page, right? This, I'm not sure. There's some way that TopoDroid decides which way to show your profile that isn't consistently a running profile. And I think that might be a setting, but I haven't found it.
We're having issues with it.
Yeah.
Just like randomly shoot one a different way.
Exactly. So you need to pay attention to that as a sketcher. Sometimes your profile will be going to the right, to the right, to the right, and then to the left. And then to the right again. It's like, that is confusing me. I don't know why it would do that. So there are ways that you can fix that. So if I go back twice and scan this data that I input, you can see 0 to 1 went to the right, 1 to 2 went to the right, 2 to 3 went left, 3 to 4 went left. I don't want to do that, so I can come in here and I can, what was it again? I think it's that one.
It's the checkboxes there.
1 to 2, 2 to 3. It's the checkboxes. Yep, left, vertical, or right. I want right. And so that did that. I come here, I want right. 4 to 5, I want right.
Basically forces an override.
Yes, so I can come in here and I can override anything in that data.
So I think if you click that and then maybe there's like a dot with a line from it. I
Yes,
think it's supposed to continue that trend. The one at the very right symbol.
this one, yes.
See, it didn't change any.
Didn't change any of the others. So anyway, as you can see, it gets a little bit annoying to have to do this quite often. And it's something that happens more often than you would like. And it's also, there are times where the data, when it gets input, it connects you to a different station. And I think that's more of what that one does, is if it gets your splay shots assigned to the wrong station, you can correct that here and then hit that button and it fixes all of those splay shots. So here I am. Let me just correct all of this and I'll show you how dramatically it changes what I was just doing before on that profile view. All right.
What country was this written by?
It might be Swiss. I don't. All right, so here I am back with my plan. All of that change didn't do anything to plan, but now profile has everything going left to right as we would expect. But the problem is catch that sooner rather than later because it's mirroring the direction here. And so what I drew in when it was facing the other way is now incorrect. So I have to come back and clean up this drawing and come in and say, you know what, this is what it actually looks like. Okay, so that's an important thing to know, is how to jump back and forth. And to do that, just to be clear, when you see it on your profile as going the wrong way, you can double click to go back to your data field, and then you can pick your particular shot, and you can say off of here, no, this should be a right-facing profile shot and not a left-facing profile shot or a vertical profile shot, which I don't even know what the vertical does, but that does select that sometimes. So, yeah, don't know. There's also a couple things here. You've seen me just tap on this one where you're, drawing, which makes a lot of sense. But if you long hold on it, it brings you back to where you were. So that's part of how this application is quite confusing, is sometimes there's short taps and sometimes there's long taps that do different things. And then a lot of times there's settings that are, or changes that are very difficult to get to. It's difficult to get back to the data, for instance. And it's annoying to get back to the data, but there are ways to do that. All right, so I have essentially this disto here that has connected. Hopefully it's still connected. I can double check that in a minute, but I'm just at now station 17, and I want to do a sphere. Let's assume that it's kind of this point right here. I'll show you what the poor man's LiDAR is. You just keep doing this till you get bored. You don't even really have to pay attention to where it goes. You just want to, you want to get anything that's super relevant, but if you're not getting anything relevant, all you care about is just like point it in all the directions. Right? And then when I'm ready for the next shot, I'm going to do the triple shot, and let me just do this a little bit more stably. I'll go to this screw right here. And then you hear the double beep. That double beep that this device did just said, I recognize that is no longer a splay shot, that is an actual shot. And I have 15 shots on here. It should have been 50 to 75 if I was doing this right, but I'm kind of abbreviating it for now. So then I jump in here and I pop out of wherever I am. This one right here. I want this download mode, and I'll see if it's still connected or if I have to reconnect that. And it's really fun watching the new data come in. because you can actually see it drawing the cave for you as it's doing it. And this is still red up here. It's still trying to negotiate, and then it's all done. Red 15 data, and now I have a station 18. But look at 18's going the wrong way, right? So now I got to come back in here into data, and I got to find 17 to 18. I have to say, no, you're a right shot. Okay. And then I do a long hold, and I'm back here. Now 18 is in the correct direction. Okay. So that happens a lot. Be ready for that. The other one that happens is on occasion if it jumps to the wrong station number, because sometimes it gets confused, you have to go back into the data and edit that, and then use the that one mode it's easier for me to point at it. This guy right here, this mode is super useful. As I said, sometimes it assigns splay shots to the wrong station, and if you correct what station it's attached to, it's then a very easy process to say, and this applies to all of them. Okay, I come back over here, long press, and then I want to do this one right here to switch from plan to profile, profile to plan, and then I can come in and look, I screwed up as a sketcher. I wasn't paying attention to where my cave was going, and I actually need to correct this. Super easy to correct it. Again, I just make sure I'm using the red line to indicate walls, and I have some shots over here. I have this passage is coming in that way, but you know what? Now it's just this little thing over there like that, and then, right? So now we have cave that looks like that. And now if I want to do floor detail, which I should be doing, I might say, okay, as I pointed out, the dots are hard to do, but there's still a little sand here that needs to be indicated, but then everything else I'm going to draw in as, here's some gravel, here's a piece of breakdown, you know, here's some soda straws, over here is a column, you know, you can just draw all of your symbols as you would normally for anything you're doing on paper, and when you're ready for 18 to 19, then you do the same thing. Is you just do the sphere of shots around there, and you keep on going.
There's also the bottom row there is shading, and I'm not sure with force tape what we'll do, but you can, it's really easy to draw water in pools with the blue shade. Just draw a circle and it fills it in.
Yep. Be really nice. And I have avoided that because I'm not sure yet what our cartographer wants to use and whether our cartographer can have those symbols or not. So I've avoided that, and instead of drawing the nice easy way of saying that's a pool, I will do something similar here that's just the pool is a crosshatch, right? So it doesn't look nearly as nice on a sketch as the blue. And similarly, there's a number of other things, like it'd be awesome if I could just say, you know what, there's a ceiling ledge. That'd be super easy, but no, I have to draw all those little T's by hand unless we are certain that the cartographer can import the symbols correctly, because the symbols is something that's not necessarily inherent for each of the applications. But yeah, I would love it if there were, you know, if I had the ability to do more things, you know, chimneys, pits, slopes, all of those would be really handy. The shading for the water would be really handy. But as you can see here, we have user and wall. Those are the two that are always good. They always work with everything, and you don't have any confusion there.
I think the rock border, have you used that one?
I have not.
If you're drawing a bunch of little rocks, it auto closes it for you. And I think that will, like, it's just another line.
Nice.
And find it, like Illustrator.
Okay. And again, there's all these symbols that are here that theoretically you can use if they're configured and usable by your cartographer, but they're not reliable, so try not to use them. The other thing I found that I thought would be really handy is, like, I want more of these blocks, but they always appear the same size no matter like how big I do them. I'm not sure what's going on here, but like they're all the same, and that's not what you want for any breakdown block where you're going to try to represent how things actually are. So there are some good things about them and some bad things about them. And like I said, I'd for the most part only do hand-drawn stuff unless there's a reason to do something else. And the most compelling reason I found is the dots are impossible to do for sand, so just use the sand. All right, let me double check to see if there's anything else I wanted to cover really quickly. And I'm open for questions at the same time. All right, so survey file name, use minimum of provided symbols, red lines are walls, white lines are everything else. Dirt, sand, symbol is needed. Load the symbol cheat sheet, got all of that. Cross sections, don't use the TopoDroid tools. You don't get the disto-x readings, and the built-in cross-section tools are unreliable and confusing. So for this cave, if I wanted to do a cross-section, I would still have to come in here and I'd have to basically say I'm doing a cross-section through this, and that looks like about 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 feet wide. So I'd say A to A prime, and then I'd have something over here that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 feet wide. And I'd do A to A prime, and I'd just draw whatever is appropriate out of a wall symbol, right, and call it good, right? So that theoretically should be your cross-section. There are ways of doing that are related to some of the line types that you can do that automatically put you into cross-section mode. I've tried all of them. They're damn confusing. I can't get any of it to work in any way that makes sense. So hand draw. All right, backsites. I've not had good luck recording backsites for validity checking. Right now what we've been doing in Horse Thief Cave is keeping a separate book on paper just to record the backsites. There exist things that you can do here where I was showing that a little bit before. There's these notes. I could put in, survey data notes here, theoretically. Put me into a keyboard. It won't put me into keyboard.
Try using your finger. We were having an issue where the S pin wasn't working on some of the TopoDroid stuff, but your finger would.
Interesting.
Really weird.
Yeah. One of the nice things about it is there is a complete help section here, so if you ever get horribly stuck, you can get semi-contextual help, but it's not ideal. The other place you can put some backsites is you can come in, I think, on some of these, and I think there's a way I can say, nope, it's the long press, here's a note. Yeah. So again, I've struggled a little bit with backsites. There's an actual field for backsites on here. It's buried deep within the advanced settings, and I've never been able to get it very consistent. So not preferred. And so what we've done so far is we just keep a separate book to record backsites. At Cheve, it's handled on the survey team to just say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't agree. And if you don't agree, you shoot it again. We're trying to record the data a little bit more long-lasting for the Horse Thief project. So sometimes that's a pain. And we'll see how that works. Yeah, so I suspect there could be a way to procedurally record these. Right now it's just really hard. So for instance, you can make the first shot of all the splay shots a back shot, then edit it, because there is a way in the data to mark it as a backsite leg. So still a little bit of experimentation there. I haven't really tested it. Pay attention to the profile, which we went into great detail about. That's the arrows on your data. If your profile starts going the wrong way, you can jump into the data very quickly and use the running profile whenever you can. Use it in almost all cases with it pointing to the right, but I think there's one I want to show you here. I think it was this side leads trip where on the profile, yeah, I have kind of a couple things going on here, right? And so it's a little bit confusing because they overlay each other, but it's very useful to have it go backwards in some cases. Maybe this isn't the one. So L-line trip. Nope, it wasn't that one either. Okay, maybe I don't have that data on here. But there was one case where, with a lot of complexity, where I was going into a branch and I was doing a running profile from each of the branches, I was able to get one of the branches going left while the other one continued right. So there are a few situations where I've found where it does make sense to have your profile go opposite of your normal left to right running profile, but it's not common, and it's something that as a sketcher you can make that choice, but often it randomly switches and you need to just stay on top of that. All right, next one. Pay very close attention when loading disto readings. It can jump stations or encounter confusion on what is splay versus a shot, or assign splays to the wrong shot. It's tricky to fix, but easier if you make sure to show all of your splay data in the shot list. So that's a mistake I made early on, is there's a setting where when you're on this page, it doesn't show the splay shots. It's only showing your main shots. And when you're in that mode, it's really difficult to show the splay shots and next to impossible to reassign them to a different primary station. So as tempting as it is, as you can see here with all this data, it's sometimes hard to see when there's the actual shot that you're interested in to check the data on, because there's so many. Like I said, you should have 50 to 100 splay shots here. And so it's hard to find sometimes the main shot to figure out what's attached to it. But I strongly recommend you set it so that you're always showing all data, because otherwise it's a headache to maneuver between the different things you need to adjust.
Will that auto-generate profile if you took a whole slew of splay shots in the same plane?
If you took a whole bunch of shots in the same plane, would it auto-generate profile? I don't know. I always just like take every shot you can in every direction. Don't try to keep it consistent. Yeah.
I was just thinking that might be an easier way to generate your profile.
No, it really does a good job of,
Creating passage profile,
right.
not just not the total cake, but
So you mean for like a cross-section type thing?
station cross section.
Yeah, and I like where you're going with that. I've never figured out how to get a good entry into that same data when you're doing profiles. There's theoretically two different ways to do it. I've tried both of them to utter failure. So maybe yes, but so far no. Yes, exactly. So anyway, yes, when you're in this mode, as we talked before, there are, you can come in here and say, and I'm not going to do this appropriately. Short tap. If I wanted to change that, it's not 47, it should be, and why is I'm not getting my keyboard here.
Again, it can be very glitchy.
So, let's see here. Huh. I need to get my keyboard turned back on somehow, but you can come in here and change the L47 to L48 and then hit this button here, and it takes all the splay shots that are after that and converts it from 47 to 48, which is nice because for the longest time I didn't realize that, and I had to change all 50 to 100 of them manually, and it was a pain in the ass. All right, let me see what else. All right, so if you need to do it, I say short tap on the bad data, then use the icons for the shot belongs to immediately preceding or following leg, and most commonly use the icon for apply the station change to all splays in the group, since that's the most common use case. And so that's what it is. Let me point these out. I have them in my notes here, but if I go to the data, and I am just saying, you know, this guy right here. So this one is all of the shots go to the previous leg. This one says all of them go to the next leg. So if I'm here, that should take it 47 to 46. And then this would say, and do everything. Okay, so this takes it to the previous station. This takes it to the next station. This applies it to everything. Also note the renumber shots from this leg onward, which is that one that I was pointing at, which is the dot with the line in parentheses. Sometimes when you have to reset a station ID, TopoDroid can lose its place in auto-numbering stations, and that icon helps. Simpler is to make sure you select the station you want the next shot to come from before you download more data. That's an important thing too. Let me cover that one. So it's quite common. You guys probably have never experienced this, but it's quite common when you're in a cave that it just doesn't go straight all the time. There are branches, right? And so you might go straight for a while. It hits a dead end. You need to back up 4 stations and start from that station to continue forward. Well, TopoDroid, when it imports the data from your disto, it auto-labels that station, right? But it doesn't know that, you know, in this case, I have L40A, right? So I went from 40 to 40A, or sorry, 39 to 40. I went 40 to 40A, but then I needed to go from 40 to 41, right? So the way you do that from this current, let's just, let me not do it on this one. Let me do it on this AGM demo, right? So if I'm here on my plan and I realize, okay, this has actually ended this passage. I am drawing this and I'm on this line. Whoops. That's one of the tricky things, is figuring out how to move it around without drawing the line. So this cave now ends, right? But it turns out from station 15, there's ongoing passage, right? And it's going back this way, because you can see that from that blue line there. So I can actually come into the data and come back from there and say, all right, 14 to 15, at station 15, that's now green, right? If I do another set of disto X reads, I've got something behind me. You can see my accurate survey technique here. So now, if I want to, because this is highlighted in green, if I want to download the data, what you'll start seeing down here is it's coming in as splay shots off of 15, because I highlighted that as the next station. And then I forgot to do the triple shot. So right now I'm going to this thing. And so I got that. Let me just download this double beep thing. And so I went from 15 to 19, right? So if I jump back over here to my plan, you can see 15 now has a shot going over to 19. So that's how you jump around if you're doing backtracking, you're going off of other shots. What else was I wanting to cover? All right. Of course, I lost my spot. Yes, side lead survey is tricky. So one thing that we need to figure out for the Horse Thief project is how to deal with leads, right? Obviously, doing trunk passage is really simple. You collect leads along the way. But when you go back on the next trip and you want to survey those leads, how do you handle that, right? So there's really 2 ways to do that. One is you can start a new sketch for each side lead. And the problem with that is you have to enter all of the front page data for that new thing. So you'd have to enter everybody's name, you have to enter all of the dates and all of the formal stuff about that. Or alternatively, you could potentially start with the previous main passage sketch and then just take off and continue sketching from that point. And we haven't solved this problem fully yet, but we're going to be playing with that this year to figure out the best way to do the side leads. If possible, preload the main line or reshoot small sections of main line to provide the anchors, because that's the tricky point, is you need to make sure that if I'm taking off of L 1415, right, and I'm doing a side lead there, I need to anchor it to L 1415. I can't just say I'm starting at, you know, LA1, I'm doing L 1415 to LA1, and that's going to be part of the process there. So it's easy if you already have that original survey that had L on it, but not impossible if you need to start from scratch. You just need to make sure you start from that original L to go to your LA, whatever that happens to be. Let me see what else I have here. Yeah, so if you have a situation where you have a lot of side leads, so in other words, the entrance series of Horse Thief has a whole bunch of very short side leads up until you get into some of the deeper stuff. So you know when you're going in to do that side lead survey, you're going to spend all day creating 15 new sketches, or do you want to start the day and have the original sketch and just do your 15 three-shot things off of your main line? So, you know, it's worth discussion, and I don't think we have a definitive answer there to what's going to be the best, most efficient way. So that's everything I had notes on. You guys sat here patiently and listened to me and watched. Hopefully things were displaying reasonably well up there. What are your questions now? You're finished now, sir. Yeah.
So did you say the goal is to actually switch over to the digital sketch or state project?
My goal is to never sketch on paper again. For Horse Thief, we're figuring out how to do digital sketch. There's the two main things we still need to work out. Okay, so let me just back up for a second. With Horse Thief, we've gotten to some of the areas where there's some massive size passages, right? They don't fit on any paper. Like, you'd have to bring in 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper to get it at 20 feet to the inch, which becomes so easy if you're on digital sketch. So there are certain parts of Horse Thief Cave that only make sense to do digitally, but we haven't fully figured out the process yet. So what we're going to try to do is formalize that process a lot more, and preferably do digital sketch for those people who are capable of doing digital sketch.
So then my question is, can you transcribe the paper sketches onto the digital sketch?
Can you transcribe the paper onto the digital? Not easily, but you can do the other way around. So what happens on this digital sketch is you have the ability to export images that are going to look just, you know, they're going to be basically what you would get coming out of a paper sketch. You can also download the entire file and load that onto another computer, another tablet, you know, whatever. And we've been doing that with the stuff that I've done through the last year on Horse Thief. So those are available to get loaded onto your own tablet, which comes with all the data, right? So going from paper sketch to digital is hard. Going digital reverse to paper is easy. What else we got? How many people want to do this now? How many people are afraid? Okay, I should say, how many people who have ever watched the sketching process now want to try this instead? Yeah, that's probably more accurate, because sketching is a whole other animal to learn. But if you're at the point of learning it, I'd highly encourage you to try the digital sketch. There's a lot of weird quirks to it, but overall I think it is a much more efficient process. And it's also less prone to error when you're transcribing data, and the line plots are always exactly the right length, all of that. So I think it's a handier way to go. And like I said, with Horse Thief, when we're getting to some of these rooms that are 300 feet long and 120 feet wide, that doesn't easily fit on paper. And so you have to take multiple sheets of paper to cover a single room, and that's very frustrating. So the ability to do it all on one thing and zoom to the appropriate level, work in close detail, zoom out, make sure it's all in scale is a very handy thing to do with this digital sketch. In fact, when I was in Cheve, one of the goals that we had was to create a ecotourism quality level map of the entrance series. Cheve entrance is what, 300 feet wide and probably 50 plus feet high. And they wanted it accurate, each breakdown block accurate to the foot. Yeah, right? Because they wanted an ecotourism level. There's no chance in hell I would have accepted that task on paper. But I spent days there doing it on digital sketch because it's so much easier. You don't have to worry about redrawing pieces or how things fit together as, you work the left wall, you work the right wall. Now you need to work the center, right? Because you can't get it all at a high level of accuracy if you don't do it that way. It's just got to be done in sections at 20 feet to the inch. And when you're dealing with 300 feet, that's just huge, right? So you got to do multiple trips and multiple pass through there, and you can all do that on the same file, and it all comes out very nice. All right, well, I think I'm getting kicked off the stage because I think mine was 4:30 to 6, right? Can't believe that time worked out. I had this document I prepared, I don't know, a couple months ago and didn't look at it before this presentation. So this is all off the cuff, and I can't believe I fit the time to within 5 minutes. So, thanks everyone.